In every cold case, the evidence sits and waits. A faded photograph, a cryptic note, a single strand of hair. These clues are locked away, sometimes for decades, waiting for a new key, a fresh perspective. Welcome to the Evidence Locker. I'm your host, Shay. Each week, we unlock a new file, examining the artifacts of an unsolved case. We'll piece together the timeline, explore the theories, and focus on the one piece of evidence that could hold the key, if only we could see it in the right light. In late December 1964, the suburban community of Garfield Heights, Ohio was settling into the quiet space between Christmas and the New Year. Holiday lights still twinkled on snow-dusted homes, children were on winter break, and the air was filled with a sense of calm anticipation. But on December 28th, that peace was irrevocably shattered by a crime so brutal and baffling it would cast a long, dark shadow over the city for more than half a century. The murder of 16-year-old Beverly Ann Jarosz. Beverly was a bright, hard-working student with dreams of becoming a Latin teacher, described as sophisticated, cautious, and kind. She was the type of girl who asked for the complete works of Shakespeare for Christmas while her peers were swept up in Beatlemania. She was found in the supposed safety of her own bedroom, the victim of a savage attack that left a community in shock and a family destroyed. For 60 years, the case has remained a haunting open wound. It is a story filled with strange clues, a revolving door of suspects, a heartbreaking confession that led nowhere, and a family's unending search for answers. But now, with the advent of revolutionary forensic technology, a new light is being cast into the dark corners of this decades-old mystery. Police say they are closer than ever to finding the truth. This is the story of who killed Beverly Jarosz. December 28, 1964, started as an ordinary day for 16-year-old Beverly and her 12-year-old sister Carol. The two girls walked together for about half an hour to visit their grandmother, Maria Vanek. Carol later recounted the morning to Dateline. "We had lunch there, and my sister washed my grandma's hair and put it up in little curlers, and she had plans for the afternoon, and so I stayed with my grandma." Beverly's plans were to meet up with two friends, Barbara and Margie, back at her house on Thornton Drive. Since both of her parents were at work, she would be home alone, waiting for them to arrive. Sometime before 1 p.m., she accepted a ride home from her grandmother's 18-year-old neighbor, leaving Carol behind. At approximately 1:25 p.m., her friend, Barbara Klonowski, arrived at the Jarosz home. She knocked on the front door, but there was no answer. She tried again, knocking louder, but was met with only silence. Puzzled, Barbara walked around to the side door, which she found slightly ajar, but the storm door in front of it was locked tight. It was then that she noticed two things that struck her as odd. First, the radio inside the house was blaring rock music, which was unusual for Beverly, who preferred classical. Second, as she stood there, she heard a series of loud thumps from upstairs, as if something heavy had been knocked over or a drawer had been slammed shut. Feeling a strange sense of unease, but also thinking perhaps Beverly was angry with her for running late, Barbara went home. When Beverly didn't show up at their mutual friend Margie's house as planned, Margie called Barbara to see what had happened. After hearing about the strange scene at the Jarosz home, the locked door, the loud music, the thumps, Margie grew worried and called Beverly's grandmother. The grandmother knew immediately something was wrong. She called Beverly's father, Thaddeus, at his job and urged him to go home and check on his daughter. There are conflicting reports about what time Thaddeus Jarosz arrived home. Most accounts place his arrival between 4 and 4:30 p.m. However, one newspaper report from 2004 states he arrived at 3 p.m. While it might seem like a minor discrepancy, this 1-hour gap in the timeline of a murder investigation is significant and remains one of the case's many frustrating ambiguities. Whenever he arrived, what he found would become the beginning of a lifelong nightmare. He called out for Beverly, but received no reply, only the sound of that same strange music echoing through the house. He went upstairs to her bedroom, pushed open the slightly ajar door, and was confronted with a scene of unimaginable horror. Blood was splattered across the walls and floor, furniture was overturned, and there, on the floor near her bed, was his daughter's body. Beverly had been brutally stabbed around 40 times and strangled with a rope that was cruelly wrapped around her neck and ankles. 12-year-old Carol was still at her grandmother's house when the call came. She remembers the moment vividly, overhearing her father's voice on the phone, raw with anguish. He called my grandmother and he was yelling, "Murder! Murder! Murder!" And so, then I knew. When detectives from the Garfield Heights Police Department arrived, they began to piece together the violent final moments of Beverly's life. The bedroom was in disarray, a clear sign of a ferocious struggle. A chunk of plaster had been kicked loose from the sloping ceiling above her bed, further evidence of the fight she put up. An autopsy would later confirm she had defensive wounds on her hands. The attack was intensely personal and savage. She had been stabbed around 40 times, with most of the wounds concentrated on her back, chest, hands, and face. Although she had not been sexually assaulted, it was suspected the motive was sexual in nature, and that the killer may have been interrupted by Barbara knocking at the door. Her clothing had been torn and pulled up to expose her torso. Crucially, there were no signs of forced entry. This led investigators to a chilling conclusion. Beverly had likely opened the door to her killer, meaning it was someone she knew and trusted, or at least someone she did not perceive as a threat. Investigators found several bloody palm prints and fingerprints in the room that did not belong to a member of the Jarosz family, a vital clue that held the promise of identifying the killer. But in 1964, forensic science was a world away from what it is today. Without a suspect in custody for comparison, the prints were useless. The most promising piece of physical evidence was the rope used to bind and strangle Beverly. Detectives quickly determined it had not come from the Jarosz household. The killer had brought it with him, suggesting premeditation. Investigators traced the rope, a type of window sash cord, to a manufacturing firm in Maryland, but it was a standard variety sold by retailers across the country, and the trail went cold. With physical evidence yielding few answers, police turned to Beverly's personal life. They learned that in the weeks leading up to her murder, she had been receiving anonymous, unsettling gifts. A ring and bracelet left at the back door, a piece of costume jewelry in the mailbox. The family had also been plagued by hang-up phone calls, sometimes 10 to 12 times a day. Beverly had become so unnerved that she had started carrying a sharp letter opener for protection. These incidents painted a picture of a secret admirer whose obsession may have turned deadly. The investigation quickly focused on a small circle of young men in Beverly's life. First was her current boyfriend, 18-year-old Roger McNamara, described as a straight-laced conservative college student. Roger was reportedly devastated and voluntarily went to the police station for questioning. His alibi was that he was homesick on the day of the murder. He passed a polygraph test, a tool then considered highly reliable, but now known to be fallible, and was cleared as a suspect. Next was her ex-boyfriend, Daniel Schultz, who had a reputation as a bad boy ex and a greaser. His alibi is not detailed in public records, but like McNamara, he also passed a polygraph and was ruled out. In the decades since, Schultz has remained connected to the case in an unusual way. He became a member of the website Find a Grave, where he left loving messages on Beverly's memorial page and pays a fee to keep it free from advertisements. Whether this is an act of a guilty conscience or that of a man who truly cared for her remains a matter of speculation. Then there was the neighbor, 17-year-old Michael Bain. Just 2 weeks after Beverly's murder, Michael was found dead in his family's basement from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. The timing was deeply suspicious, and rumors immediately began to swirl that he might have been the killer, overcome with guilt. Investigators looked at him hard. His alibi was that he was at his job at a grocery store, seemingly confirmed by a punched time card. His fingerprints were compared to those found at the scene, but there was no match. Michael Bain was officially cleared. As the weeks turned into months, the investigation stalled. Police even considered the possibility that the killer was a woman, given the intensely personal nature of the stabbing, which suggested deep-seated rage or jealousy. This theory led to the cruel and baseless rumor that targeted Beverly's best friend, Barbara, the girl who had knocked on the door. The harassment became so bad that police had to issue a public statement clearing her name. Then, in 1965, a shocking development emerged. A man named William Brayhard, who had been arrested for kidnapping a 7-year-old girl, confessed to a Cleveland detective named Vincent Farini that he had killed Beverly Jarosz. According to the family of Detective Farini, who died in 1994, Brayhard's confession was stunningly detailed. He allegedly told Farini exactly where to find the murder weapon and some of Beverly's bloody clothing in a locker at a Greyhound bus station. Farini's son-in-law, George Pelota, claims that Farini retrieved the items, a butcher's trimming knife and clothing, and handed them over to the Cleveland police, only to be later told that the evidence had been destroyed. It seemed like the breakthrough the case desperately needed, but it went nowhere. Brayhard was questioned and, like the others, passed a lie detector test. Not long after his confession, he committed suicide in jail. Without the physical evidence Farini claimed to have found, the confession was a dead end, another ghost in a case already full of them. The murder of Beverly Jarosz didn't just take one life, it shattered an entire family. For her younger sister Carol, the trauma was a defining force. She told Dateline that the years following the murder were a blur, a period she barely remembers. "I don't know how I got through those 6 years. And then, when I went away to college, I feel like my life came back to me or something. I was always, like, a real outgoing person. I had lots of friends and everything. And then, when this happened, I just feel like I got to be an introvert." Beverly's parents, Thaddeus and Eleanor, were devastated. The strain of their daughter's violent, unsolved murder eventually fractured their marriage, and they filed for divorce in 1980. Eleanor moved out, but Thaddeus remained in the house on Thornton Drive for the rest of his life. In a profoundly sad and hopeful gesture, he kept Beverly's room and the rest of the house exactly as it was in 1964. He died in 2012, having held on to the belief that one day a jury might need to see the crime scene just as it was when his daughter was taken from them. The case also haunted the lead detective, Captain William Horrigan. He never stopped working on it, even after his retirement. He pursued tips on his own, unable to let go of the case that had defined his career. Before his death in 2004, he revealed that in the years following the murder, he had received several chilling phone calls from a man claiming to have wasted Beverly. The caller, who sounded high on drugs, never gave a name or a reason. Horrigan went to his grave carrying the heavy burden of the unsolved crime. For decades, the case file gathered dust, a monument to a forgotten tragedy. But in the 21st century, the fight for Beverly has been reignited, both by dedicated law enforcement and by a generation of citizen detectives. The Garfield Heights Police Department has made it clear that Beverly's case remains a top priority. In a statement, Detective Mark Manari said the case is still being aggressively investigated and that their goal is to give the family and the community the answers they deserve. That aggressive investigation has been supercharged by modern science. Detectives have utilized an advanced technique called MVAC DNA testing on key pieces of evidence from the 1964 crime scene. The MVAC system is a wet vacuum sampling method capable of lifting microscopic traces of DNA from porous surfaces like rope and clothing, material from which it was previously impossible to extract a viable profile. The results have been astonishing. Police have confirmed that this testing has resulted in the discovery of new DNA. Based on these findings, detectives have conducted new witness interviews and even surveillance. In 2017, Detective Carl Bigacki told Fox 8 News that they had at least 2 prime suspects, but were missing another piece of the puzzle. Today, the department confirms it still has suspects in its sights. While police continue their official work, a community of online sleuths keeps Beverly's memory alive. John Ferrato and Scarlett Vinson, members of a Facebook group dedicated to the case, produced a 2-part documentary on YouTube, believing they know who killed Beverly and that the killer took her diary as a trophy. They have presented their findings to the Garfield Heights police. After 60 years of waiting, of unimaginable grief and frustrating silence, Carol Bartos is still holding out hope for justice for her big sister. She remembers Beverly as a sophisticated, beautiful girl who she looked up to, a girl who loved poetry and listened to classical music. Within the pages of the complete works of Shakespeare that Beverly received for Christmas just before she was killed, she might have paused on a line from The Merchant of Venice. Truth will come to light. Murder cannot be hid long. In the end, truth will out. For Beverly Jarosz, the truth has been hidden for 6 long decades. But with new DNA, active suspects, and a police department that refuses to give up, the end may finally be in sight. Somewhere, in the genetic code lifted from a 60-year-old piece of rope, the ghost of Beverly's killer may at last be given a name. And for her sister, Carol, and for the memory of a family torn apart, the truth cannot come to light soon enough. The Garfield Heights Police Department continues to ask for the public's help. Anyone with information, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant, is asked to contact Detective Mark Minari at 216-475-5686. A full transcript of this episode, along with photos and links to the official tip lines, can be found on our website at the Evidence Locker Pod. Thank you for listening. Join us next time as we unlock another case file here at the Evidence Locker.